Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Today is another one of our episodes reviewing an LODD to learn lessons from these tragic events and try to prevent them from happening in the future. Today all four of us were able to make it. I'm Doug, joined by Paul, Dirk, and Zach. Zach, how are things?
They're good. Staying busy, just got off work and about to go out tonight to a hockey game for my birthday and just kind of relaxing the rest of the days off. So
What hockey game?
just a Rebels game in Red Deer
hockey?
there. Just gonna go see some WHL. It's always good hockey. I always forget like how good the WHL is actually to sit back and watch, right? The NHL is like, it's high stakes, high entertainment value, but it's a system. Whereas I think the WHL is a little nicer to watch sometimes because the guys are all fighting for
I
a
think
job.
the WHL
So
has more evenly matched skill. Everybody's kind of at the same spot.
yeah,
All right. Who are they playing?
Good hockey to watch. They're playing the Winnipeg Ice,
The old Edmonton
the
Ice.
old Kootenay Ice, where I used to grow up. Edmonton.
Back in the day.
Yeah, you betcha.
Cool.
So
What's new, Dirk?
Nothing really. Couple of days off. Spending a couple of days, so a couple of nights with the family. So got to record tonight's game, so I can watch it later.
The real game.
And fast forward, and the real hockey game. Yes, that's always going to be less frustrating than the last game. But other than that, it's all good. Everybody's healthy, so.
Well,
let's get this
Paul,
done.
You must have nothing to add because you just sit around retired all the time, don't do anything.
Yep, that's me, twiddling my thumbs, reading my book. Yep, in the rocking chair. I was in Calgary all week teaching ICS, safety officer, ICS, position specific safety officer course, co-teaching that with the past fire chief of Medicine Hat and a past deputy chief of Lethbridge. So that was very, very interesting. We had people from all across the country. It was hosted by CAN Task Force 2, which is the urban search and rescue team out of Calgary, and they were sponsoring the course. So that was good. Got home yesterday, and now I'm catching up on my emergency management courses that I'm instructing, and getting ready to teach up a whole bunch more ICS stuff over the next few months. And also getting a podcast with the Beyond the Breakers guys again. So I'm working on a script for their podcast. So yeah, keeping busy for the old retired
Well,
guys.
I'm busy too. I'm in the middle of my block. Well, I guess tonight's my last night, but I'm working a trade for another guy's whole block going on after today. So I'm working 4 more shifts. But the wife and kids went to the in-laws' house yesterday, and I had to deal with shitty roads getting them there and back, but it's all good.
Glad you made it safe and sound. It was sounded pretty nasty out there. We were going to go to Red Deer.
The good thing was on the way back, I knew the highway was closed, so I didn't even try it. I just detoured all the way around, and it was actually it was not great, but not the worst roads I ever drove on. It's winter in Alberta. Happens every year. You just got to deal with it.
That's right.
Okay, well, let's get on with our topic for today. It's going to be a long one, so we're going to split it into 2 parts. Today we'll discuss the event. Next time we're going to discuss all the recommendations and changes that have been made. It's a different for us where usually we're reviewing an incident that's like a decade or a few years old anyways, but this one, like the 1-year anniversary happened like this week, like really close together as we're recording, I mean. It's last January, fire in Baltimore, Maryland resulted in a triple LODD after a collapse at a structure fire. The report that the department did was recently released, and it's where we got most, if not all, of our information for the podcast here. And we're going to share it on our social media pages. And if you're interested, you can go check it out. It's a pretty long, in-depth report, so it's kind of interesting to read. So Baltimore is a port city located in central Maryland, which is on the east coast of the United States, around Washington, D.C. area. It's an independent jurisdiction, which is not located within any county. The largest municipality and the cultural center of the state of Maryland. The population of Baltimore is about 585,000. It's a lot similar to Detroit, where we all watched the Burn documentary and the Burn X documentary 5 years later, where it's lost a lot of population out to the suburbs and all stuff like that. It's about a third of its peak population has left. Went from the sixth largest city by population to the 30th. So that's a strain on the city's shrunken tax base to pay for all the basic services. I mean, the city has shrunk, quote unquote, people wise, but the city limits didn't change. So you still have to have a fire department everywhere and utilities everywhere and all that. It's increased poverty, drug abuse, homelessness, all of which take a factor in this incident. The U.S. Census Bureau estimated that there's vacant buildings for over half of all the buildings in Baltimore, which is like unheard of for me in Western Canada to think that like here we got one vacant on a block and it's like, oh, there's a vacant building. I can't imagine half the buildings in the city being vacant. So it's not uncommon to get multiple fires taking place in the same building. And then it's a vacant building, so no one takes care of it, so nobody fixes anything. So it's just a compounding problem going forward. So in 2010, the department created a pilot project to mark vacant buildings that were unsafe for interior firefighting. They placed temporary placards, which were red in color, constructed of corrugated plastic. White reflective tape was used to create a large X across the surface of the placard. The placards were consistent with International Fire Code to indicate a dangerous structure. Companies utilized staples, nails, screws to attach to the buildings that they determined were unsafe. By like 6 months later, 2011, the department ran out of money to continue the project. There was a draft in 2013 to get it going again, but it was never officially implemented. So along with that project, the MDT, or the mobile data terminal in the rig, would show information on the CAD system. However, there was no evidence that this building for this fire was ever designated as under the code X-ray program, or ever anything in the CAD about it being a dangerous structure to operate in. So in Baltimore, their CAD system creates a separate file for every incident. And there's also what they call premise files, which are info about a building. So when you're going to an incident, you can reference the premise file and get, oh, it's a dangerous vacant building info, but it doesn't automatically show up in the incident file on your CAD. I think the captain has to kind of close one window, open the other. They don't talk to each other very well. And notes that are made during an incident don't automatically go into the premise file. So if you go there in 2015 and you go, oh, this building is dangerous, it doesn't automatically show up in the other one for the fire you go to in 2022, which would be a problem. In the case of this fire, which was 205 South Stricker Street, the Mayday and the collapse of the second floor and request for a building there was a request for a building inspector from previous fires in 2015 and 2016 that were noted in their own incident files but were never integrated into the premise file. So in the morning on January 24th, 2022, the MDT did not provide any information about this building being an unsafe vacant building. There was also no visible indicator on the building at the time of the fire. Another quick little note, the city of Baltimore has it's called City Watch cameras. 700 cameras around the city that are monitored by employees of the police department or contractors. Due to staffing, they're not monitored all the time. The cameras can be taken control of and point, tilt, zoom if something is going on. And there was a camera at the corner of Stricker Street and Pratt Street, which is the intersection close to where this fire happened. And it provided some data for the inquiry about this fire, about the timeline and what kind of happened as people were arriving.
So that's something to make a note of, Doug. If you people want to go get more information, there's a lot of pictures in the report, and some of them have come from that camera, so you can kind of see the progress of the arrival and then the fire and stuff like that. So it's interesting that they had those cameras that provided more information. So it is in the report. So if we'll put the contact information for those, or the web address, if you have time to look them up. They are interesting.
So a quick overview of the Baltimore City Fire Department, always referred to as Baltimore City because there's also a Baltimore County Fire Department. They're different. So the Baltimore City Fire Department Has more than 1,600 employees, the majority of which are in operations. The chief of the fire department oversees the whole fire department, obviously. The executive assistant to the fire chief is the next in line, overseeing 3 assistant chiefs. There's an assistant chief of operations who is in charge of all the field personnel, which is the fire suppression and EMS. It's an integrated fire department. An on-duty deputy chief or shift commander is assigned to each shift, functions as a citywide tour commander. There's 7 on-duty battalion chiefs, 6 of which are in fire suppression and 1 in EMS. Members assigned to telestaff for department staffing report directly to the shift commander. So the shift commander indirectly supervises the operational activities of 32 engines, 3 squads, 17 trucks or ladder companies, not quints, just straight truck companies, 1 heavy rescue, 2 fire boats, 6 EMS district officers, and 21 medic units, which are ALS, 7 ambulances, which are BLS, and there's various support units in the city. So, I mean, when you look at like the deployment of resources for Baltimore, for having 500,000 people, they have like similar, if not more, resources than like Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton, which all have like 800 to 1 million people in them. So I think for the amount of people in the city, they're pretty well equipped.
I think you find that generally between Eastern North America and Western North America. Eastern North America is typically staffed heavier, by population. I think I've never done a survey, but just by looking at it from experience, you kind of notice that even in Canada here in Ontario and down east versus out west here.
Yeah, it's something that's, I don't know much about the Western United States fire departments, but I know lots of them in the Southwest, I think, run only 3 people in an engine company. I'm not sure, but the citywide shift commander responds citywide in all working fires, additional alarms, incidents of unusual or serious nature, like hazmat, building collapses, MCIs, technical rescues, utility outages, weather events, assumes command as necessary. Like we stated, the department's divided into 6 fire battalions, 1 EMS battalion. There's 4 shifts. The fire side works 24-hour shifts, which is 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 5 days off, and then it repeats. EMS works 4 on, 4 off, which is 2 days, 2 nights, 4 off, 10-hour days and 14-hour nights. The minimum staffing for all the fire units is 4 people per unit, which is about 292 people per shift. So that's like, I don't know, maybe 80 more people than the city I work for per shift. Baltimore, I'm not going to read this whole paragraph word for word, but it's a major urban fire department that has trained their members in all the 1001, level 1, level 2, rescue, hazmat, emergency vehicle operator. There's firefighter, paramedic apprentice programs where recruits starting in 97, recruits were cross-trained on both of them. And again, they have all kinds of training that any big city urban department would have, which is lots of training compared to some of the events that we discuss on here. Any comments on the department or the city before we get into the event?
Like you said, interesting that there's about 80 more personnel on shift than the city that you're familiar with, which has about 300,000 more
thinking
people.
about it, I wonder how much of that is the EMS side also.
Yeah. Because you guys aren't,
there's no
transport.
How many are they running per rig?
Minimum 4.
How many? 4? Okay, so that's minimum 4. Okay.
NFPA 1710 staffing is 4 per truck, right? So, every engine squad, ladder, rescue has minimum 4.
Okay.
All right, well, the event, January 24th, 2022, at 10 to 6 in the morning, Baltimore City 911 dispatchers started receiving numerous calls for a reported dwelling fire. Several addresses were reported, and one caller stated that there were 3 children trapped inside the home. Baltimore City Fire Communications Bureau dispatched box alarm 5510 at 05:53. So it took them 2 minutes from getting the call to dispatch, which is fairly normal. Fire building was a 3-story brick, single-family, vacant residential row house, 3 floors above the ground with approximately 1,570 square feet of living space, one floor below grade. It was located on the east side of South Stricker Street, comprising of 12 attached row houses that spanned a city block. The fire building was positioned between 203 Stricker Street, which was a boarded vacant building, and 207 South Stricker Street, which was occupied, which would have been the Bravo and Delta exposures, respectively. The structure was originally the third building from the north side of the continuous row of similar style buildings. However, the first building, which was 201, collapsed in 1997. The initial alarm consisted of engine 55, engine 14, engine 23, engine 36, engine 47, truck 23, truck 10, rescue 1, battalion chief 6, battalion chief 3, and medic 21. Which to me, that's like more than most fire departments have heard of, sending 5 engines on the report of a structure fire. Lots add a truck or 2 when it's a confirmed working fire or the multiple calls, whatever. But to have 5 engines on the initial dispatch, to me, that's a pretty heavy response.
Just so people know, so these buildings were built in the late 1800s, and they were brick construction or type 3 construction, so wood floors and roof and
very
walls.
Common East Coast to have the row of a whole city block of just building, where we don't have that so much in the Western North America.
What's crazy here is that the neighbors part of the building collapsed in '97, and there's still people living in this row house block. That's just mind-boggling. You have a vacant and it's occupied, and then you had a vacant but that was collapsed. It's just wow. I cannot imagine this, but again, we live in the West, so everything is newer and nicer.
Well, and people probably couldn't afford to go buy a new place and move out. Can't speak for them, but
yeah, the two places which you probably get into, they were vacant for quite a while. I mean, the fire building had 2 fires in it before.
Yeah, just the next building, like Dirk said, 201 collapsed, 203 was vacant, 205 was vacant, 207 still had people in it. I don't know about the rest of the
Right.
They said there was 12 in a row, so it'd go up pretty high in the numbers there. I don't know what the rest of the block had, but the first documentation of smoke from the building was caught by one of the City Watch cameras. Due to the time of the day, though, the smoke went unnoticed before the fire was reported. A still photo from City Watch, along with the times and information from 911, reports that there was a drastic change in fire conditions at approximately 05:51. One caller stated there was flames shooting out of the windows and stuff flying everywhere, which was prior to the arrival of the Baltimore fire units. There was a large burst of pressurized smoke, followed by a shower of embers that projected from the Alpha side windows. This was immediately followed up by a heavy volume of fire from the second floor, the third floor, and the roof, which occurred approximately 4 minutes prior to the arrival of engine 14. So yeah, like we said, 05:55, which was 2 minutes after dispatch, 4 minutes after the report. Engine 14 arrived on location, reported a 3-story middle of the group with fire showing from the second and third floors. Engine 14 responded from their station. They were assigned second due, however they arrived first due. They stopped at the hydrant at the corner of Pratt Street and Stricker Street. Engine 14's lead-off firefighter, which is the term they use for the hydrant man or the person that catches the hydrant, exited the engine and proceeded to lead off, which is catch a hydrant. Engine 14 did not announce that they had arrived first and were assuming first due engine responsibilities, which could have created a little bit of confusion because when you have predetermined tasks based on the order you arrive in, if somebody arrives out of that order, everybody else needs to know that now I'm second due, not first, or third, not second, or whatever. A lieutenant who worked on engine 14 the night before had been relieved a few minutes prior to this box alarm coming in, but responded on the engine as an extra person riding in the back. He was not included in Engine 14's accountability. He was in full PPE when he exited the apparatus, however, he did not have a portable radio. He used Engine 14's DeWalt angle grinder with a wood blade attachment to remove the plywood from the front of the fire building. So at 05:55, the communications office reported to the units that were responding on this box alarm that they were receiving 200 South Calhoun and 206 Norris Street of people trapped in 206 Norris Street, which was the Charlie side exposure street, the next building to whatever direction it is. But basically, across the alley, the next street was Norris Street. The remaining first alarm companies arrived on location as Engine 14 prepared for an interior attack. Truck 23 started raising ground ladders. Engine 36 pulled a second attack line from Engine 14. Engine 23 arrived on location as the rapid intervention team, which I think was predetermined based on their arrival order. They positioned on the Alpha side. Meanwhile, Engine 55 and Truck 10, which I believe were the second due engine and second due truck, were beginning operations on the Charlie side of the dwelling from the alley. 05:56 hours, Battalion Chief 3 arrived from the west, parked facing west on Pratt Street at the southwest corner of Pratt Street and Stricker Street. Battalion 3 initially designated himself as the incident safety officer in accordance with the initial dispatch. He then made an inquiry to the Fire Communications Bureau to determine if Battalion Chief 6 was on the scene. Once he received a response that Battalion Chief 6 had not arrived, he assumed command, quote, until Battalion Chief 6 shows up, end quote. He gave a size up and upgraded the scene to a working fire, which indicates that the incident is escalating. All personnel on the first alarm will be engaged for 30 minutes or longer, and additional units are needed. So units dispatched on a working fire are one more engine, one more truck, the Air Flex unit, which is extra air and support unit, Car 5, which is a citywide tour commander, the Fire Investigations Bureau, and a safety officer. The members of Engine 14 removed the plywood from the front door and encountered fire conditions on the first floor. They began extinguishing the fire on the first floor and advanced into the dwelling. The lieutenant of Truck 23 also entered the dwelling to begin a primary search.
So just to point out here, this comes important later. All 3 floors had smoke and flames coming out of them. They took the plywood off the door and they had smoke and flames coming out of the door. And that was also the same at the back. They had smoke and flames all 3 floors before they went in.
Engine 36 had their attack line stretched to the front door and were waiting for the line to be charged. A minute later, no staging area was identified by the battalion chief. The planned transfer of command to the first assigned battalion chief, which was Battalion Chief 6, never occurred, which was due to the severity of the incident and the ensuing collapse and mayday. If you pay attention to the times here, this all happens very quickly.
Yeah, like 10 minutes.
So Battalion Chief 3 positioned himself in front of the fire building so he could have a clear view of the dwelling. However, there was no official command post location ever identified or announced. The span of control for the incident commander at this time was 10 units, 5 engines, 2 trucks, 1 rescue, a battalion chief, and a medic unit, which 10 units going to Paul's ICS background is too many. I mean, they say 3 to 7. 10 units is a lot. I guess that's part of the problem with having 5 engines on your first response. And perhaps not enough chiefs, but I mean, it's not like New York City where there's 400 battalion chiefs to pick from. There only is 6 in the whole city.
So just a quick question, Doug. They sent 2 battalion
two
chiefs
battalion chiefs on the
to
initial
these fires, right?
response. I believe one is supposed to be command. The first arriving is command. The second arriving is incident safety officer. This
Safety.
This building must have been like right in the middle of a bunch of stations, because I think that the first in engine was supposed to be second. The first arriving battalion chief was supposed to be second, so they must have all, and I think they all arrived fairly together. So it must have been like right in the middle of this district and that district.
Well, and working fire designation would also
on-duty
send
commander.
the deputy, right, which is the shift commander. So he would be en route.
So again, the working fire was dispatched at 05:57, which was engine 30, engine 13, truck 8, medic 12, safety officer 2, car 5, which was the on-duty shift commander that you mentioned, the Fire Investigation Bureau. It says this is not the standard assignment for working fire. I think some, like investigators, maybe they were just listening, or dispatch thought it was a bigger event and they just assigned some extra units. Truck 10 arrived on scene, made a right-hand turn into a parking lot adjacent to the Charlie side. From that vantage point, while still in the unit, the lieutenant of Truck 10 gave his size up reporting fire showing from all 3 floors in the rear. So, but this building being a literal city block, 12 units, it's pretty tough for command to go do a 360. So they must rely on the second due units to go to the back of the structure and give command eyes and ears back there. So he's telling them, we're in the back and the whole thing's going. There's fire on all 3 stories here. Truck 10 also had a 5th member riding during the previous evening shift. This member was still riding on the truck when the incident was dispatched and operated as an additional firefighter. Once in position, the members began raising ground ladders to the exposures, while the officer proceeded to the rear of the fire building to continue his size up. The fire was extending to both exposures. The Bravo exposure that was vacant had prior damage from the 2015 fire, and the Delta exposure was occupied at the time of the fire. Engine 55 called in at the hydrant. Members of Engine 55 proceeded to stretch their 400-foot inch and 3/4 pre-connect across a vacant lot and down the alley to the Charlie side. Meanwhile, Truck 23 had positioned their apparatus just short of the fire building on the Alpha side and started to perform the first due truck duties. Engine 14 entered the Alpha side and observed. The observation from the exterior was that they appeared to be making progress on the fire, which was being quickly extinguished. Battalion Chief 6 arrived on location at 05:58. I mean, for him being the first due chief, he got beat in there by like 3 minutes. So I don't know if he was out and about already. I don't know, but he was late getting there anyways. Shift change or who knows, right?
Traffic maybe. But and there is a picture in the report that, because I'm right away going, hey, you got fire all 3 floors. You took the plywood off the door. The survivability profile, if there is a chance someone's in this building, the survivability profile is really low. But I was impressed that the picture from the City Watch camera, their initial hit in the doorway, the fire darkened down on that first level anyway, because you can see the door and the window picture, and there's nothing there, like it's gone. So because I was going, what the hell are you doing going in there? But it did appear to have a lot of effect when they first went in.
So once Battalion Chief 6 arrived at 05:59, the Fire Communications Bureau provided the incident commander with a rundown of the working fire units, and still there was no staging area identified for working fire units. When we talked about this incident amongst ourselves off air, I don't know if we all agree on when a staging area needs to be established. Like, I'm not sure the first due or the working fire. This is kind of different because the first alarm of units is a lot. So by the time your working fire units are getting there, now you got 7 engines and 3 trucks and whatever. So maybe at that point it's time to start saying, Kate, stage here. When we need you, we'll call you. Because the first alarm units have predetermined tasks. They don't need to stage and be told what to do. They just do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the level 1 staging. You're close. If you send only 6 rigs, one parks around the corner, so it's not really plugged up in that area. But if you send that many rigs, there should be a procedure of announcing a staging area somewhere close by. Yeah, I agree.
And before Paul gets in there, usually once you move up to a second alarm, that's when you start having your level 2 staging.
Not a second alarm yet.
And
I mean,
the amount of units.
In a lot of cities, the amount of units that are there is a second alarm. But for Baltimore, we're not a second alarm.
I think working fire to me is sort of like first alarm A.
Yeah.
It's not a first alarm and a half.
It's true. It is like 1.5 alarms.
Fill the box.
Fill a box.
Right on. Blue number here soon, Burke, with all this blue card talk.
Oh.
Yeah. You didn't.
I just took the course.
Take the course. Yeah.
Jack, you didn't just.
What's a box?
What's a box?
Whatever you define it.
You didn't just take the course, Zach. You just drank the Kool-Aid.
I didn't.
So the incident commander instructed Truck 8, which was one of the working fire response units, to gain entry into the Bravo exposure to check for extension upon their arrival. He gave them a task before they got there. When you get here, go do this. Once the working fire units arrived, the span of control for the incident commander increased to over 15 units. Although the incident was expanding, the department issued tactical worksheet and or tablet computer were not being used by the incident commander or anybody else. To outline the unit assignments, maintain accountability, and assist with transfer command. This guy was just standing in the street going off the top of his head. Maybe had a clipboard in his hand, I'm not sure. But lots of moving factors going on here. So the crew of engine 36 stretched a 150-foot inch and 3/4 backup line off of engine 14 to the front door. At 05:58, the officer from engine 36 called on the radio for the second line to be charged. The backup line did not get charged right away because the supply line from the hydrant was not turned on yet. There was a 2.5-inch cap missing from the hydrant that engine 14 let off from. So there was a delay because the leadoff firefighter from engine 14 and the pump operators from engines 36 and 14 worked quickly to overcome the problem by using a spare nozzle from engine 14's apparatus. So the engine 14 crew was going in the building off a tank supply off the engine, waiting for the engine to get positive water supply. And I think it's a good job here of engine 14's operator to not charge that backup line until they had a water supply. Run only one line off your tank.
Yep, I did that at that house fire, 2 stories fire. You were there, I think, Doug. I was pumping the Bronto, and the guys were wanting a second line, and I still didn't have hydrant water. And the lieutenant was like, "Come on, I need the other line, need that line." I said, "No, you can't have it, not until I get a line from the hydrant, because I only had a 300-gallon tank."
So between 05:59 and 0600 hours, the pipe and leadoff firefighters from engine 36 were standing just inside the front room of the dwelling waiting for their hose line to be charged. The lieutenant of engine 36, who had been behind them flaking out hose, met them at the threshold of the front door. The lieutenant of engine 36 stated he had tried to transmit over his portable radio several times, but was unsuccessful as there was too much radio traffic at the time. At 0603 seconds, the lieutenant of engine 36 keyed up his radio again and requested the second line be charged. After ensuring he had a water supply coming from the hydrant, engine 14 pump operator charged the backup line. Around this time, it is believed that the pipe firefighter from engine 14 was positioned close to the base of the staircase that led from the first floor to the second floor. The acting lieutenant from engine 14 was behind him, followed by the leadoff firefighter from engine 14, who had got the hydrant, did those duties, and now went and met up with his crew. The lieutenant of truck 23 was believed to be in the front room closer to the Delta side, performing his primary search. So still at 0600 hours, 3 minutes after Battalion Chief 3 assumed command, and 5 minutes after the arrival of Engine 14, there was a catastrophic interior collapse of the original fire building. 3 members from Engine 14, 1 member from Truck 23, and 2 members from Engine 36 were inside the dwelling at the time of the collapse and were trapped. The 2 firefighters from Engine 36 were quickly removed from the building with no injuries. A mayday was declared, the RIT team was activated, the other members of the first alarm and working fire assignments heroically pushed into the burning building to begin rescue efforts. There was still a large volume of fire surrounding them as they worked to gain access to the trapped firefighters. Members reported that they could hear bricks and other debris falling as they made their way further into the building. By that time, the fire was extending to the Bravo exposure, which was a 3-story vacant dwelling, and the Delta exposure, 3-story occupied dwelling. If you look in the report when we link it up there, the pictures from that City Watch camera, you can see it talks here that the lieutenant from Engine 36 couldn't get on the radio, and you can see that he's with his guys by the door, and then can't get a hold of the battalion chief. And he said in his interview, like, he had the tingly feeling going on that something was wrong, and he left the porch to walk over to the battalion chief and say, "Get them out." And like literally as that was happening, the thing collapsed. And you can see him standing there talking on the pictures.
We talked about that sort of, tingly feeling or feeling of impending doom or whatever it is, something wrong with this picture. And if we talked about this week in the safety officer course that I was instructing in Calgary, and Dr. Rich Gassaway, the fire chief that went and became a bit of a scientist on situational awareness, says because your brain and also the other guy, Lexapol, Gordon Graham talks about it. Your brain's a hard drive full of material you've learned over your lifetime, things you've seen, incidents you've been to, etc. And as you're looking at stuff, you're constantly processing all that and accessing that data, and that feeling, that tingling, that something in your head that's kind of intuition. It's really piecing together stuff you've seen before into outcomes. And obviously, probably what happened to this guy is something that he saw inside the opening of that building or whatever, or the way things were going. It's like, hey, this looks bad. I've seen this before. That's where that comes from.
Well, and like
You're processing the information in your brain.
to
So
your point,
Rich Gasaway
I'm
talks
not
about that.
diminishing like a smaller or a volunteer fire department that goes to 5 fires a year. Baltimore here is full of vacant buildings, like we said. This guy's probably been to multiple fires in his career when by the time he gets to be the lieutenant of a engine. Multiple fires on a vacant building, probably been in the exact same fire in a different building multiple times. So when he starts feeling like something's not right here, that's a huge red flag in your mind, right? Like they always say, trust your gut, right? Like if something doesn't feel right,
Right. Right.
something's
Yep.
probably not right. And your brain might be recognizing it without you even consciously
Yep.
knowing that your
Something's
brain's
triggering him.
recognizing it, right?
Must have been really frustrating when you try to get through on the radio, right? Because you want to use the radio because you're closer to the building than to the chief, and then you just kind of like screw it. Turns around, walks up there as it happens. That must have been a
Yeah,
horrible feeling
it's like
for that
I can understand
firefighter
it though. I
there.
mean, we've been talking for 40 minutes here about this incident, but what we're talking about has only been like 6 minutes of incident time, right? So there's lots of units arriving on scene, stretching line, connecting hydrants, giving their size ups, whatever. Like it seems like you assume that there's lots of useless radio chatter going on when you hear like, oh, I couldn't get on the radio. But in the initial stages of an incident, there's lots of pertinent info going on, right? Whether it be the chief assigning guys to do something or the guys on the Charlie side saying, hey, chief, the building's fully involved back here, or the hydrant people being like, we're missing a cap, we need a nozzle, or the saying, hey, charge my line, or saying, we can't charge your line because we don't have water. Like, it's not like they're just talking about how the game was last night. It's important information that's tying up the radio.
There's something to be said about using different TAC channels on scene. I know some departments use that for specific
Yeah,
tasks. That would clear it up, and then the chief would monitor these different channels, right? But well, it is what it is. And we've all been there. That everybody's on the same
I think
channel
it's
and
it's a
everybody's
good
talking at the same
idea for
time,
like quote
right?
unquote support roles can be on their own channel. Like if you're two guys directing traffic at either end of a car accident, you don't need to be on the same channel as everybody else. If you're at the staging area or you're in rehab, you don't need to be on the fireground channel. But if you're the first alarm units all going to work aggressively at a fire, you all need to know what's going on with each other. You can't have like search and rescue and fire attack on two different radio channels, in my opinion. They need to be on the same channel. And this chief is already overwhelmed. Now you want to get him to listen to multiple radio channels to know who's doing what. He's going to be even more overwhelmed. So, approximately 6:01 hours, engine 30 and truck 8, which were dispatched on the working fire, arrived on the scene. Truck 8 reported to the Bravo exposure like they were told to do upon arrival. Uh, since they had been told that this collapse happened, so they went to work trying to reach the trapped firefighters. Engine 30 went to help the RIT team remove debris blocking the access from the Alpha side of the building. The incident commander attempted to initiate some of the Mayday procedures, such as gaining control of radio, attempting to assign a rescue group supervisor. However, non emergent radio traffic continued on the fireground channel, and Battalion Chief 6 remained on the Charlie side of the dwelling. In addition, there was no personnel accountability report performed. These facts, along with interviews and radio logs, indicate the incident commander was overwhelmed and had reached task saturation. I'm sure shit hit the fan here when the building collapsed and everybody was panicking and talking and maydays were being called and and everyone had their 2 cents to add on the radio. Then you got more trucks showing up, and it was probably complete chaos. And it just, there was already a problem of the chief having too much going on for one guy, and now it just got exponentially worse without there being help for him. So now there's way too much going on for one guy.
Which is what I always ask as a incoming chief officer to any incident is, if something goes wrong, do we have the capacity, the reserve on scene? Can we handle it? When there's an emergency within your emergency, the fire's the emergency, the collapse is another emergency. Can we handle it? Do we have the management, and not only the physical resources, fire engines and equipment and guys, but the management resources to control it, to set up? Because basically a mayday is a whole other command situation
Well,
and delegation
in
thing.
defense
So
of
that's
this
something that we
incident
always talk
commander,
about.
like I said before, this all happened really quickly, right? Like, he did show up and say, "This is a real fire. I need a working fire assignment." Well, that brings another battalion chief and
Right.
the shift supervisor, but they weren't there yet, right? Like, the first arriving working fire dispatch people were just
Yeah, they only
showing
had
up.
2 chiefs.
So there was.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, Paul,
Yeah.
and you can ask for all the help in the world, but they still have to get there. There's still time before they get there. So this would have been very overwhelming for this incident commander, standing on the street looking at a building that your guys are fighting a fire, and all of a sudden it's collapsed on them, and you got no help, right? And the help you have asked for isn't even there yet. But then you got to ask for more and get even more coming, because it's going to be more overwhelming.
But he did have 10 captains,
Yeah,
10 officers
and a bunch of them were already
on
committed to
scene.
their.
That you could have easily grabbed one of those, and say, "You're in charge of the mayday."
But that's not part of their SOPs, maybe.
You guys do that all the time.
So 0603, Incident Command was attempting to contact Engine 14 via their portable radio. No response. It was later discovered that both the lead-off and the pipe firefighters from Engine 14 did not have their portable radios with them. Both of their radios were found in the apparatus. I mean, that's not good. To me, that's a problem. You got to have that radio. That's your lifeline. Yep, radio belts.
Radio belts.
Or I mean, however you choose to carry your radio, just make sure you have your radio. If it's in your pocket, if it's in your pants pocket, if it's wherever. I mean, the radio belt helps. The thing I like, I call a radio strap. That the strap I put under my jacket, so I have to have my radio on before I put my jacket on, so I never forget my radio.
And it's also supposed to be underneath your jacket.
Protect the cord for your microphone,
Correct.
right? So it doesn't burn through.
So at 0605, the incident commander placed Battalion Chief 6 in charge of the rescue operation, which is like an easy flow path when the
Good,
but
like delegation.
Battalion Chief 6 was safety because he was the second arriving battalion chief, so it's an easy guy to then flow over to be in charge of rescue operation, because now safety has to do stuff, right? That's the way I look at it. The captain of Engine 23, operating as Rich, quickly located Engine 14's lead-off firefighter, who, like we said, had come up to join the crew. He was found lying on his stomach, pinned by large pieces of burning debris. Simultaneously, Truck 8 entered the Bravo exposure building to locate an alternative means of ingress into the trapped members. They initiated a breach in the brick party wall between the two dwellings through a fireplace in the front room. Quick outside-the-box thinking in my mind. At 0606, the lieutenant of Truck 8 reported they located the member and they were breaching the Bravo exposure wall to make entry into the fire building. This opening placed the members in close proximity to the firefighter. As the breach was being opened by Truck 8, members from Truck 10, Engine 55, and Rescue 1 had already entered the original fire building from the Charlie side. The collapse was so severe on the Charlie side that there was a significant drop from the threshold of the rear door down to the debris pile. So they all collapsed into the basement, or cellar, or whatever you want to call it. Initially, they attempted to use a 16-foot extension ladder to climb down into the rubble. However, the ladder was too long. Members retrieved a 7-foot straight ladder from Truck 10's apparatus and used it to climb down onto the rubble inside. Members began searching for the trapped firefighters in zero visibility. Utilizing ticks, the lieutenant from Truck 10 quickly recognized the outline of a trapped member. Truck 10 and Rescue 1 worked their way through the building towards the member. When physical contact was made, they were able to determine it was Engine 14's pipe firefighter. Per interviews, he was found in a seated-like position with his legs out in front of him. He was trapped and entangled by heavy structural components of the building. An immediate request was made for a second RIT team, which is good. Once the one RIT team goes to work, you need a second one.
And just wanted to note there that of using the thermal imaging camera to do the search for RIT, which is great. In the fall there, we did quite a few podcasts that were in the early 90s or late 90s. And, a lot of times thermal imaging cameras weren't used. So it's good to see that, we're progressing in the use of the new technology tools to make sure that they had the most efficient search ever. So really good to see that they thought of that and they used it.
That's a really good point, Paul. And when we talked about those other events, we always said that the recommendations say use a tick, and we went, well, yeah, by now they probably are anyways. This just proves that, yep, they are. 06, 07 hours after the request for the second RIT team, the incident commander, which was Battalion Chief 3, requested a second alarm. However, still, no staging area was identified for second alarm companies. To me, at that point, you need a staging area. Like you one, because you don't want to clog everything up, and two, because you need to know who's here, in my mind.
As I learned in the blue card training, Chief Brunison said, you do not have command if you don't have staging, because it's just a mess.
I think the staging area needs a chief to be the staging area manager to come out to talk to. Paul, the thing that I don't like about saying a captain can do it is now that crew is useless.
Ties up four guys.
You're saying a captain can do it. I'm saying a chief should do it.
Yeah, I'm with you because of the other resources.
So for almost 90 minutes, the members worked under adverse conditions to free Engine 14's pipe firefighter from the debris. During this time, more chief officers arrived on scene who had chose to respond to the incident under their own discretion. So this isn't battalion chiefs, but it's chiefs higher up the chain of command. Most, if not all of them, did not report to the command post, and they all self-assigned themselves to do something on the scene. So the accountability at this scene was weak to begin with and getting weaker by the moment. So at 10 after 6, Car 5 assumed incident command. He then expanded the incident command system by making Battalion Chief 3 operations. During the transfer of command, Battalion Chief 6 was reassigned to safety, even though he had already been reassigned to rescue by Battalion Chief 3. Safety Officer 2 arrived on location and announced himself as safety just prior to Car 5's transmission. So there's total confusion here about who's doing what. The aide to Car 5 removed the mobile data terminal from Car 5's vehicle to utilize it in an assistant with incident command. However, the battery died almost immediately, and it was removed, rendering it useless. Battalion Chief 3, who is now assigned as operations, continued to refer to himself as command when contacting the Fire Communications Bureau. His span of control was still greater than 15 units. A little confusing to me here how all these chiefs are arriving on scene and assigning this and assigning that and being called this. Are they all at different spots on the fire ground instead of at a joint command post where Car 5 can look at Battalion 3 and say, no, you're not command anymore, I am. Stop calling yourself command. But it was total confusion.
Yeah, I was just going to mention this, Doug. It seems like everybody just showed up. There was no command post where they all did a face-to-face. That would have alleviated all the confusion. And then you can assign one guy. It's like, I'm in charge. You do this, you do that, and off you go. But it seemed like they came from all sides and then just did their stuff. Right?
And even more to that, lots of these big urban departments, when the battalion chief's in command and the deputy, whatever he's called, the shift commander shows up, lots of times automatically then he becomes command because he's higher ranking. So it's just weird how there's so much confusion over who does what, right? Or who should be called what.
That makes me think that's like Charleston. If I'm here, I'm in command because I'm the chief, though I'm not.
If you're going to have the procedure that if I'm here, I'm in command because I'm the chief, then when you're there, you have to be command. Like, you have to do your job. So even with members trapped and the fire extending into 3 dwellings, all radio communications for the incident remained on Fireground 1. This led to almost constant radio traffic on the Fireground channel. In several instances, important reports and requests associated with the rescue were followed by units calling en route. Radio traffic concerning water supply and suppression activities in the exposure dwellings were all jamming up the radio. The issue of increased and unnecessary radio traffic was prevalent throughout most of the incident. I'm kind of on the fence, to be honest, about like, does the RIT operation stay on the one channel and everybody else moves to another channel?
That's my vote. Everybody else moves.
The people fighting the fire still need to know what's going on with the rescue, and the people doing the rescue still need to know what's going on with the fire. So, like I said, I understand both sides of the equation, and I'm on the fence about what side I want to be on. I think the important thing is everybody needs to have radio discipline and only say what needs to be said.
That's where your RIT officer or RIT chief or whatever you want to call it comes in there. He has to monitor. In that case, you have to have 2 channels. You have to monitor 2, and you are the liaison. So you can vet the information that's coming in from operations that are fighting the fire, and what do you give to your rescue teams, to your RIT teams. I think that's where Paul comes in too. Like, he's like, you need a chief to do that, right? And then a second channel has to be assigned at that scale. We had incidents before where you don't have the time. That Mayday was over so quickly. You don't need to switch channels, and often where the first teams that were inside the structure are the ones that saved the firefighters. But here it was already a big collapse, bigger operation, more units coming in. You had to have your instant command system in place, and all the chiefs, and they have to sort out the channels, and that never happened. So I'm with you, Doug. It's not necessary to switch channels right away because you need that separation, or don't need that separation initially. But once that incident expands, you do need that separation. That's where the chiefs come in. That's where chief.
But there's also a little bit of discipline amongst yourself, where if there's a collapse and a mayday and a RIT operation going on, maybe you don't need to talk on the radio about, like, charge the hydrant. You can use some hand signals or send a runner or something in that instance. I don't know. Anyways, at 6:06:12 hours, the captain of Engine 23, who was RIT, made a transmission stating, "We have Engine 14's portable 4, and we were removing him from the debris." This was Engine 14's lead-off firefighter, who was located along the Bravo wall a short distance from the front doorway. He was conscious, with no helmet on, facing the rear of the building. It was unclear if his facepiece and hood were still in place. The members were quickly using only their gloved hands to free his arm and legs from the large pieces of burning debris. The members involved were attempting to pull and drag him out of the rubble by any means possible. The Dragger SCBA harness is rated for 750 pounds of stress on the top yoke and 600 pounds of stress on the handles for pulling and dragging. In this case, members were unable to lift him. Members resorted to pulling on the shoulder straps and waist straps of the harness. These forces being exerted on the straps caused them to tear during rescue efforts. After several attempts, Engine 14's leadoff firefighter was pulled free of the debris. At 06:14, he was successfully removed from the Alpha side of the fire building. He was then placed in care of awaiting BCFD EMS personnel and transported to hospital. Once the leadoff firefighter was removed, rescue efforts were focused on the pipe firefighter from Engine 14. As previously stated, he was heavily trapped by large amounts of debris. During interviews, members described the conditions as digging through black sand, which resulted in very little progress. His upper body was quickly uncovered, however, his lower torso remained trapped. The heat and smoke from the fire added to the difficult task of operating in the interior. Crews operating hose lines had the difficult task of attempting to extinguish the active fire without further complicating rescue efforts. Hose streams were striking members and dislodging loose bricks from the upper portions of the building. There was also concern about flooding possible void spaces that may be located lower in the pile, as there were still members that were unaccounted for. So suppression activities continued simultaneously with the rescue efforts as engine and truck companies worked together to extinguish pockets of fire and keep it from spreading past the Bravo and Delta exposures. Well, it couldn't go past the Bravo exposure because that one was already gone.
Keep in mind, they don't
Yeah.
know how many people are lost at this time. They haven't done a PAR.
At 06:16 hours, Incident Commander requested a collapse assignment, which summoned units from the Special Operations Command, or SOC, Squad 26, Truck 6, and the Collapse Rescue Unit. Usually the Collapse Rescue Unit is an unstaffed unit that Rescue 1 brings with them when needed. However, with this incident occurring around shift change, the oncoming crew shift had enough guys that they could just jump on the truck and come. 06:18, Incident Commander requested a response of all the squads, which more units from SOC, which was Squad 40 and Squad 54. So basically, every unit that can do rescue stuff in Baltimore City was there. All three squads, the rescue, and the collapse rescue unit were all there. 06:18, Car 2, the Assistant Chief of Operations, announced his arrival on the Fireground Channel, but did not assume a role in the Incident Command system. At 06:19, Incident Command made OEM-1 the rescue branch, and I believe I saw that this guy used to be part of Rescue or SOC or something. No units were formally assigned to the rescue branch, therefore the span of control for operations did not change. Still 15 or more units. Additionally, there was no request for a separate talk group. There should at least, I mean, like I said, I'm on the fence about the RIT and the operations being on a different channel, but the staging and the arrivals and like all that can be on a different channel. I completely agree with that. Truck 10, Rescue 1, Truck 8 were attempting to maintain continuous air supply to the pipe firefighter. His air supply was being rapidly depleted by using RIT bags and SCBA packs removed from the backs of rescuers. The rescue branch supervisor identified that additional air supply would be needed for this operation and requested another RIT bag to the Alpha side. During interviews, members repeatedly expressed concerns about the limited number of RIT bags available on the first alarm, and they're only carried by the truck companies and Rescue 1. So first alarm's going to have 2, maybe 3 RIT bags on the scene.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are still in the smoke, they're still in the fire, and it's 20-some minutes, almost 30 minutes since they went into the building. So they're out of air.
Yeah, I was thinking that when they first arrived, I think the third engine assumed RIT. So you would think that a RIT bag should be part of
either
an engine's
that or make a truck company come
right?
and do RIT, right?
And do that and be a RIT like in New York, where I think it's the third arriving truck assumes RIT,
Like you
right?
say, their next note here:
Fast.
members assigned to engine companies expressed a lack of familiarity with RIT bags during interviews. However, if your procedures say that the third due engine company is RIT, it's kind of upon you as a company or an individual, if you're on an engine company, to know how to use a RIT bag because you might be doing RIT. So it's not all up to the department to do everything for you. So at this point in the incident, like Paul stated, there was still confusion about which members were still trapped or missing. A personnel accountability report had still not been performed. At 6:22, Battalion Chief 2 reported that the collapse rescue unit was on scene trying to meet up with Rescue 1. During this incident, which occurred close to shift change, like I said, the oncoming shift brought the unit to the scene. While beneficial, these members were then not integrated into the accountability system because usually the collapse truck isn't a staffed unit. They don't count as a unit on the scene. During this time, there was concerns about secondary collapse. 625 operations requested that a collapse zone be set up at the front of the building. The collapse zone was not cordoned off, and members, including chief officers, continued to operate within that area. At 6:25, Deputy Chief 9, the acting Deputy Chief of Safety, announced his arrival on location. Again, was not given a role in the formal incident command system. So everybody's showing up, everybody wants to help, but they're all just kind of making things worse. Many of the chief officers do not have an MDT in their vehicle and must announce their arrival on the incident verbally. So that was again, during this incident, these arrivals created unnecessary radio traffic on an already busy fireground channel. Maybe it doesn't need to be on that channel. 628, Battalion Chief of EMS attempted to expand the incident command system by assigning herself as the EMS branch director, notifying command of the EMS units operating on scene. Really good. Doing everything the way you should be doing. However, the EMS battalion chief was never acknowledged by command or assigned a separate talk group, and an EMS staging area was not designated. However, when you look at the pictures of the report, the ambulances were all parked in the one spot, so they made their own staging area. They just didn't do it formally. During this period, the rescue branch created a RIT staging area in the Bravo exposure where RIT bags and other equipment could be staged. Operations also requested Truck 25 to collect any available RIT bags. Rescue operations were hampered by the continued efforts of engine companies to knock down fire above. While necessary for fire suppression, the hose streams were knocking down debris and reducing visibility. At 6:41, 41 minutes after the collapse, 41 minutes, the first personnel accountability report of the incident was conducted. The aide to Car 5 announced that all companies should stand by for a PAR. Engine 55 reported they were par. The par request for Engine 14 was interrupted by other radio transmissions. When there's a par going on, everybody just needs to shut up and let the par happen. When the Truck 23 par was requested, Truck 23 Portable 2 answered. The message was unreadable and no clarification was requested by the aide of Car 5 or Fire Communications Bureau. Radio records indicated there was no response to the par by Truck 23 Portable 1, the lieutenant. The par continued with numerous radio interruptions. At 06:48, the aide to Car 5 completed the par and stated, "I believe I spoke to all units besides Engine 14. I believe everybody else was par." So now they think they're only looking for Engine 14. They already got one guy out. They found the other one. So they think that there's one person trapped and one person unaccounted for still. At 06:44, the request was made for Airflex 1's long air line to be turned on. This transmission was made on the fireground channel while the PAR was being conducted. The airline was never utilized to supply air to trap members due to incompatible connections. There's no excuse for that. I mean, you're one city, you have one air pack system, you should have the right connections to use it. At 06:49, the aide to Car 5 identified that Truck 25 was not included in the initial PAR. He initiated contact and determined that Truck 25 was par. No further radio attempts were made to track units or members for the duration of this incident. At this point in the incident, there was still confusion with how many members were unaccounted for. The lieutenant of Truck 10 continued to attempt to get an exact number of members still trapped or missing. However, the inaccurate information from the PAR did not provide a clear picture. The lead-off firefighter from Engine 14 was the only member who was removed from the building, I guess other than the two from Engine 36 that got out right at the beginning. The aide to Car 5 requested the mobile command unit be dispatched. It arrived on location but was not utilized as a command post. Shortly after sunrise, a member from Truck 23 reported verbally that his lieutenant was unaccounted for. A verbal message was sent to the personnel inside the structure inquiring if Lieutenant Buttram was participating in the rescue. It was relayed that he was not involved in the rescue operation and therefore identified as the fourth trapped member. At 07:17, under the guidance of SOC, Truck 23 repositioned their aerial ladder over the center of the fire building. This allowed a member of Rescue 1 to lower a life safety rope from Truck 23's aerial to the awaiting members on the interior. Members on the exterior assembled a 3-to-1 haul system with mechanical advantage, and while utilizing Truck 23's aerial ladder as a high directional, they were able to lift and ultimately free Engine 14's pipe firefighter. At 07:39 hours, Rescue 1 reported that the victim, Engine 14 pipe firefighter, had been removed from the building. He was placed in a medic unit and transported to hospital. The removal of Engine 14's pipeman created access to the acting lieutenant, who was located partially beneath him. Rescue 1 reported that she was heavily trapped. Members started to dig through the debris by hand. Efforts to remove the acting lieutenant were similar to those used to free the pipe firefighter. Many of the members dispatched on the first alarm had been working for over 2 hours to remove the trapped victims. That's a long time without a break and without more help coming to relieve you. But how do you relieve a guy that is working to save a firefighter? They're not going to want to leave.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. They
At
won't want to leave. That is a
07:47,
problem.
a request from made to Incident Command to relieve exhausted personnel that had been operating since the collapse occurred. Additional personnel were sent to the Charlie side of the fire building to effect relief. At 07:51 hours, the lieutenant of Rescue 1 called for trench shovels to assist in the hand digging and clearing of debris. Members worked for approximately 40 minutes to free the acting lieutenant. The haul system with the high directional was used again to assist in lifting the acting lieutenant from the debris pile. She was placed in a Stokes basket and removed from the Charlie side of the building. 08:18, the incident commander reported that the acting lieutenant had been removed from the building. She was transported to hospital. Anybody want to make comments about using the aerial ladder as a high point?
Just that, I mean, it's a little bit of a risky situation just because of the tip load of the aerial, especially if you're using it as a directional. If you're pulling down on it, so you're doubling the load by what you're lifting and what you're pulling at the same time, which could overload the aerial. Most aerials today have a 500-pound tip load at full extension at 0 degrees. Now they weren't at 0 degrees, so that helped them. Some departments will do a device where they'll put rollers on the end of the ladder, and the end of the rope is actually tied to a rung on the ladder, and then they'll use the ladder, they'll extend or retract the ladder to lift the person rather than pulling on it with a 3-to-1 haul system to reduce the load. Remember, the weakest point of aerial ladders is stability. They're only rated at 1.5 times the stability. So it's a 500-pound tip load ladder. It's rated for 750 pounds. Any more than that could become unstable. But, at the same time, the bad part about that, right, Zach, is that you're using hydraulic power to move
I was just
somebody,
I was just
which
gonna say, yeah.
you wouldn't feel it if something was caught.
You
Although,
don't move live loads with a mechanical device, winch
Yeah.
or whatever. That
right,
that that's the other thing everybody makes fun of. But no, we do not use winches to lift live loads. And then Paul, that saying, but with the 0 degrees in all the pictures, and our audience can check out the pictures there. They are pretty close to 60, almost 70
yeah,
degrees
they
over the
had a good
building,
angle on there.
and it's a 3-to-1 with a single firefighter load.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like they had trapped firefighters, and like they're in a hole in a collapsed building with no other high point around.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it, and there's different ways to do it. The
Sure.
trick is it should be practiced, and it should be hopefully according to some sort of specifications if you can. But yeah, definitely should be practiced, and you should have a procedure on it so that you know what you're doing, and you can do it when it's all the chips are down and you're in the dark, in the smoke, and in whatever. So that's the big
And we
thing
don't
there.
know if Special Operations Command in
Mhm.
Baltimore tried this before. That was not mentioned in the report. So it might have been something that they regularly use or practice with,
No,
right?
it was mentioned that they'd never done it before. So in a got a real call. So, but
Yeah.
whatever.
No, I get that, not a real call, but maybe for practice. And they did the math on it, and you know, so I don't think they could have used a 5-to-1, but then they would know that they probably overload that system. So I think there's a good reason why they used the 3-to-1 in that
Yeah,
setup.
nothing wrong with it. Just
Are they standing on top of the person? If you're using a 5-to-1, right? Odds are 3-to-1 straight up the ladder, straight down.
yep. I mean, it's
I
all
think
good
if it's
stuff.
something they've never
Just
done
different
before,
ways
then
to
that's
do it,
pretty
right?
quick, good out of the
Yep.
box thinking to think of it on the fly like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to
Agreed.
the incident. Daylight allowed the incident commander to get a clear view of the damage. The structural stability of the building was extremely compromised. It was then decided to allow rescue personnel to quickly assess the area to determine if there was any sign of Truck 23's lieutenant. There were no visible indications of his location. After a short period, the incident command ordered all members to evacuate the building, declaring the rescue operation had concluded and would transition to a recovery mode. This decision was supported by the partial collapse of the rear delta party wall. Requests were made for heavy construction equipment to be respond to the scene. At 8:26 hours, heavy equipment started to arrive. At 9:43, operations requested that Tower 1 respond to the incident, like the Baltimore Fire Tower truck. Beginning at approximately 1050, these resources were used in the complete removal of the alpha side wall of the original fire building and the chimney from the delta side exposure. This was a slow, meticulous process which took the better part of an hour. An excavator was then used to pull back large pieces of debris from the first floor of the original fire building. At approximately 1206, SOC personnel deployed a search camera into void spaces located near the front door to attempt to locate the Truck 23 lieutenant. Shortly after 1500 hours, Incident Command allowed members back inside the building to recover the lieutenant. Using a bucket from an excavator as an overhead protection, members continued to work in an area with the potential for additional collapse. At 1514, the lieutenant of Rescue 1 reported, "We can start to hear the pass device now." To me, that shows how buried he was in that, like, for the last 5 hours, 6, 7 hours, you couldn't even hear his pass device, and now finally you could.
It's amazing that it's still actually still
Eventually,
going because the battery is going to run out at some point, right? Do you think after 5 hours
members worked
it'll be
arduously
dead?
to cut and hand dig through the final layers that trapped the lieutenant. Once he was completely freed, he was placed into a Stokes basket and passed by members to the exterior. He was then transported to the office of the chief medical examiner. At 1608 hours, the Incident Command reported that the last member had been extricated. At 1609, Incident Command reported, "You can place this incident and fire under control." The duration of Engine 14's lead-off firefighter rescue was approximately 14 minutes. The duration of Engine 14's pipe firefighter was approximately 90 minutes. The duration of Engine 14's acting lieutenant's rescue was approximately 130 minutes. The duration of Truck 23's lieutenant's recovery was approximately 10 hours and 8 minutes. The Engine 14 lead-off firefighter suffered numerous injuries, including a severe concussion, burns to his neck, back, right leg, and chest. In addition, he registered high levels of carbon monoxide. He was treated for his injuries in hospital, and on January 27, 2022, he was released. Several days later, he was admitted into the Johns Hopkins Adult Burn Center for further treatment of his burns. The firefighter has been released from Johns Hopkins and continues to recover from his injuries. Tragically, Lieutenant Paul Buttram of Truck Company 23, Acting Lieutenant Kelsey Sadler of Engine Company 14, and firefighter paramedic Kenneth Lakeo of Engine Company 14 did not survive and were all killed in the line of duty serving the citizens of Baltimore City.
Just a terrible, tragic event that happened very quickly. The guys work effortlessly to search and identify and recover and treat their brothers and sisters that were trapped in this.
I mean, it's something I hope I never have to deal with, but I couldn't imagine being at a scene all day long knowing that there's still a firefighter in there and we have to go get them, and I mean, for taking 130 minutes, like 2 hours to recover, to when you're still in the rescue phase, you hope, like, to just still keep working and trying to get them and try to do whatever you can to it'd be terrible.
I've been to scenes where we were looking for a victim and nobody wanted to get pulled off that job because you really want to finish it, and everybody realized, okay, this is a recovery now. Nobody wanted to go home because for your own peace of mind, it's kind of like when you find that body, that's when the incident is done. So you've done everything you could, and I could not imagine having a firefighter down. And look at 9/11. Like, guys worked for days and weeks on end because they just didn't want to give up. And it's really, when we talk about PTSD and the mental health side, like, you want to be there. And but at some point, fire command or incident command has to make a decision. It's like, okay, guys, you are exhausted. You're not doing a great job digging and trying to get this patient firefighter out. So at some point, you have to get relieved, but you want to come back, right? And yeah, that's my take on this. It was just, yeah, everything went so fast, and then everything kind of slowed down for the rescue and then recovery operations. So
Yeah, and We talked about that in our safety officer course this week. Is it's so difficult to pull people out and pull them back and get them to rest so you can continue operations, right? And the decision-making capabilities deteriorate, and the physical abilities that deteriorate in that environment very quickly.
To me, even just being a firefighter, on the floor, and I'm sure you guys can all agree with this, is, we sit through how many command courses and how many, times it seems like it's all common sense. But at the end of the day, when it doesn't work, because we're so used to how we're working all the time, right? We know the chiefs are going to show up, they're going to take command. We know that they're going to assign their sectors, divisions, groups, whatever you guys want to call them. But when they don't happen, and you start to see like our systems start to degrade and turn into complete and total chaos. It's like I'm sitting here thinking of the times where that's happened to us. Luckily for us, it didn't go down this route, but where trucks start showing up on scene, assigning themselves different tasks without any kind of centralized command at all, because that guy's completely overwhelmed.
Well, that's why ICS was made in the first place. After the fires in California in the 70s, when they had all the King's men and all the King's horses, and they still lost.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't lose any firefighters, but they had fatalities and lots of homes burned and all that kind of stuff. And after that, they went, well, hang on, what are we doing? And that's where they came up with the 14 principles of ICS. Accountability and span of control and delegation and unity of command, all that stuff. That's is why, because
Yeah.
it leads to the breakdown or the inefficient operation. The collapse might have happened anyway. Nothing's going to stop that. That's different training. That's different avoidance and different factors that had to happen.
But not being overwhelmed in the first place.
Right.
You have a clearer picture of that. Like, you have 14, sorry, not 14 units, but I'm exaggerating, but you have so many units arriving on scene and you're trying to give them all tasks. Are you taking that extra few seconds to say, he said he got that gut feeling. How late in the game did he get that gut feeling? Or is your mind elsewhere? Like you were saying, otherwise, your mind is elsewhere trying to get all these assignments done. And are you taking that time to, you know what? This is 3 floors that are burning. Should we get guys out of here sooner? Could that have been made sooner? So, yeah, absolutely. We're armchair quarterbacking this at the end of the day, but when you're overwhelmed with that many units under your command,
and we're going to get into all that.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
we talk about the recommendations and changes since, which is a positive note on the recommendation in that they have actually enabled some changes already within this. The report took 8 months. And I think similar to Charleston, Chief Routley had told us, is they did initiate some immediate changes based on the initial investigation, and then they implemented more once the report was done. They did the same thing here, is that there was some immediate changes they tried to do to their procedures to address some of the glaring issues. And then when the report came out, now the chief resigned when the report came out, either soon after or just before, from this agency taking some
Well,
responsibility.
I'm looking forward to part 2 where we
happened,
talk about all that stuff and learn about the changes they've made. One final note I want to make about this incident, though, is to me what I think is one of the most incredible shows of brotherhood and support that was ever shown. And February 2nd, 2022, for the memorial service of the 3 fallen firefighters. For the first time in the 200 plus year history of the Baltimore City Fire Department, the entire fire department was put out of service, and EMS and fire coverage was provided from almost 20 counties, along with the Washington Naval Station, the Annapolis Fire Department, and Washington, D.C. Fire and EMS, so that every firefighter from Baltimore could go to the funeral service. And I just think it's incredible that they could put the whole city. I remember when this happened thinking of my city, if we needed 30 extra engine companies to come here and operate, where would they be coming from? like we're a way more sparsely populated area of the world. So where does because you got to leave your own places covered also, right? So where does the 30th extra engine come from to cover our city? But I thought that was incredible that they could put the whole fire department out of service and still maintain coverage. And I remember looking on some websites at the time, and there'd be a fire with 7 different fire departments at it, and they could all work together, and it didn't matter what the truck door said, right, Paul? They could just put the fire out.
That's right.
And
You
I
use an
mean, to
ICS,
that
it doesn't
point,
matter
I
the
know
name on
this
the
area of the
door.
world has a lot of cross-border mutual and automatic aid, and even I know in Washington for sure, Washington D.C., they oftentimes use surrounding volunteer fire departments to backfill their own stations. So it's not completely unheard of there, but still a pretty big show of support to let all the people of the affected fire department have the day off to go to the funeral. Anyways, thanks everyone for joining us for another LODD review on the Emergency Traffic Podcast. We hope there are lessons learned from every episode, and we do. And again, we would really love to hear some feedback from anybody. You can follow us on social media. Stay tuned for part 2 of this event as we go over the recommendations and changes made on our next episode.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.